My name is Lily Parker. I'm 32 years old. I live alone in a two-bedroom apartment on the 12th floor of a quiet residential building on the west side of Denver. It isn't huge, but it's mine. The kind of place that feels like exhaling after holding your breath for years. I work as the operations director at a logistics company. The job is relentless, calls that come in at odd hours, crises that bloom out of nowhere, weekends that disappear before I even realize I had them. But the work has one strange comfort. It keeps my mind occupied. Because if my mind isn't occupied, it drifts back to the same place, back to my family. Back to the party 3 years ago, the party that started as a celebration and ended like a public execution. Back to the night I realized my role in that family was never daughter. It was resource. 3 years ago, around this same time, I was promoted from department manager to operations director. I'd been working toward that position for 6 years. 6 years of overtime, 6 years of missed birthdays, 6 years of eating dinner out of vending machines because the office lights were still on and my name was still on the urgent list. The day I got the promotion, I didn't just feel happy. I felt relieved, like someone had finally stamped worth it onto all the sacrifices I'd made. That weekend, I bought a bottle of wine, nice enough to feel special, about $100. I stopped by a bakery my mom used to love and picked up pastries she always claimed were too sweet, but somehow always finished. And around 6 that evening, I drove to my parents' house. I didn't tell them I was coming, partly because I wanted to surprise them, and partly because a small, stubborn part of me still believed that if I showed up with good news, they would light up. That they would say something simple, something normal, something like, "We're proud of you." When I appeared at their front gate, my parents looked startled, like I'd shown up with the wrong script. My father squinted at me, as if trying to remember why I was there. My mother wiped her hands on a dish towel and asked, almost immediately, "Why are you here today?" Not "How are you?" Not "It's good to see you." Just "Why are you here?" I smiled anyway, because I'm trained to. Because in my family you learn early that if you want warmth, you have to bring your own. "I wanted to see you," I said, "and I have something to share after dinner." Dinner went on as usual. The clink of forks, the TV murmuring in the background, my father chewing like he was doing me a favor. No one asked what I wanted to share. No curiosity, no teasing, no guessing. It was like I was a coworker attending a required meeting. After we finished eating, we sat in the living room. I opened the wine, poured 3 glasses, and placed them on the coffee table like offerings. Then I looked at both of them and said, "Mom, Dad, I've just been promoted. I'm operations director now." For a heartbeat, I truly believed the world might shift, that my mother's face would soften, that my father would smile, that the silence would break into laughter, or hugs, or something that felt like home. Instead, my father let out a quiet sigh. "Congratulations," he said, short, flat. My mother's voice came next, softer, almost wistful. "If only Brielle had a good job like you." There it was. Not celebration. Comparison. My promotion wasn't a moment for me. It was a measuring stick they immediately used to point at my younger sister's failure. And the cruelest part? They didn't even notice they'd done it. I sat there holding my glass, watching the wine catch the light, and it hit me. This wasn't a family toast. It was a reminder. A reminder that no matter what I accomplished, my success would always be used as a tool to fix someone else. I set my glass down and stood up. "I should go," I said quietly. My father barely nodded. My mother didn't stop me. I grabbed my jacket, said goodbye, and walked out into the night like I was leaving a house that had never been mine. In the car, I didn't turn on music. No radio, no podcasts. Just silence and streetlights, and the steady hum of my tires on the road. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was sad. Because I was their child too. And I couldn't understand why loving Brielle always seemed to require shrinking me. A week passed. Work swallowed me whole. Deadlines, vendor issues, staffing schedules. I kept my head down, kept my posture firm, kept my heart tucked away where it couldn't get bruised. Then Saturday morning, around 10, my phone rang. My mom. I almost didn't answer. But something in me still wanted to believe that maybe I'd misread everything. Maybe I'd been too sensitive. Maybe they just hadn't known how to react. Her voice was different this time. Soft, warm, almost sweet. "Lily," she said, drawing out my name like it mattered. "Try to come home this Sunday." I frowned. "Why?" "Your dad and I want to throw a party to celebrate your promotion," she said. "Some of the relatives will be there too." My chest tightened in a way I didn't expect. Because even after everything, the words still worked on me. "Celebrate you." I said yes immediately. And I hated how quickly hope ran back into me, like a dog returning to the hand that hid it yesterday. The next evening, around 6, I arrived at Ocean and Barrel, the restaurant my mom had texted me right after our call. It was a high-end seafood place in the heart of the city, elegant without being stiff, warm lighting, dark wood, the faint scent of garlic butter and white wine floating in the air. The kind of place you go when you want people to know you can afford it. When I walked in, my parents were already there with a few relatives. And Brielle was there too. We hadn't been close in years, not because I hadn't tried, but because every attempt turned into me being asked to fix something, pay for something, tolerate something. The moment I stepped in, my uncle, Austin, burst out laughing. "Congratulations, Ms. Big Shot Operations Director," he teased. A few people clapped. A few smiled too widely. I smiled back, nodded politely, and took a seat near the end of the table. Then I noticed something small. My mother didn't look at me the way she had on the phone. She looked alert, like she was watching the room, like she was counting. And even though I didn't understand why yet, a cold thought slid quietly through me. This isn't a celebration. This is a setup. But I stayed, because I wanted to be wrong. Because I wanted, just once, to sit at a table with my family and feel like I belonged there. And that was the first mistake I made that night. The first half hour felt almost normal. Relatives arrived in waves, each entrance like a small performance. Coats draped over chairs, perfume trailing behind them, laughter loud enough to announce importance. Ocean and Barrel didn't just serve seafood, it served status. And my family was soaking in it like they'd paid for a membership. "Lily, look at you," Aunt Brenda chimed, kissing the air beside my cheek. "Operations Director, who would have thought?" I smiled politely, because that's what you do when you've learned your real feelings don't matter in a room like this. Across the table, my father sat with his shoulders squared, chin lifted, as if my promotion was his trophy. My mother kept scanning the room, making sure people saw the table, saw the wine, saw the fact that we belonged here. And Brielle, my younger sister, sat close to them, dressed like she was attending a gala instead of a family dinner. Her lipstick was perfect, her nails immaculate. She wore the kind of confidence you get when you've never had to earn anything the hard way. It had been months since I last saw her. We used to be inseparable as kids, but somewhere along the way, love turned into expectation. And expectation turned into resentment. Uncle Austin raised his glass. "To Lily Parker," he announced, "the woman who climbed to the top." People clinked glasses. The sound should have felt warm, but it didn't. Because when a family like mine celebrates you, they're not really celebrating you. They're celebrating what they can extract from you next. At first, the conversation was light. "How's Denver traffic? Are you still running those long hours? What's it like managing that many people?" And then, like clockwork, the questions shifted. A cousin leaned in, voice lowered like it was a secret. "Hey, Lily, my friend's son is graduating this spring. You think you could put in a word? Just to get his resume looked at?" Aunt Brenda chimed in immediately after. "Oh, and Lily, you know my neighbor's starting a small delivery business. If you invested early, you'd make a killing. You can afford it now." I kept my smile in place. "Let's talk about work another time," I said lightly. "One-on-one, it'll be easier that way." It was polite. It was clear. It was my way of saying no without inviting war. But I noticed something. My mother's expression tightened every time someone hinted at money. Not because she was uncomfortable. Because she didn't want anyone else to claim what she believed belonged to her. Then the food started coming. Not just food, statements. Whole steamed lobsters served on hot stone plates, fresh oysters arranged over crushed ice like jewelry, miso-glazed black cod, seared scallops, king crab salad, and the wine, bottle after bottle of high-end French white wine, poured without anyone even glancing at the price. I watched the table fill up like a feast for royalty, and my brain, trained by years of budgeting my own life, couldn't help calculating. This wasn't $1,000 dinner. This wasn't even $2. This was big. And yet everyone ate like it was casual, like it was normal, like it was expected. I tried to convince myself not to overthink it. It's a celebration. They're doing something nice for once. I even decided quietly in my head, when the bill comes, I'll offer $1,000. A generous gesture, a thank you. Maybe I'd finally leave tonight feeling like something between us had healed. Around 8:30, plates were cleared, laughter softened, and the atmosphere settled into that satisfied hum people make when they've eaten too much and don't want the night to end yet. My mother raised her hand and called the server over. The server approached with a professional smile, holding the check folder like it weighed nothing. My mother took it without hesitation. She opened it, and then, like she was reading out a lottery win, she announced clearly to the entire table, The bill tonight is $4,313.45. The number landed on the table with a strange heaviness. A few people widened their eyes. A few chuckled awkwardly. And my father, without looking at anyone, reached for his water glass as if this was normal. I cleared my throat, forcing myself to sound calm, grateful. "Thank you, everyone," I said, "for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. I'd like to contribute $1,000 toward the meal." For a moment, I thought they might nod, maybe even smile. Instead, both my parents turned toward me like I'd insulted them. My mother's voice slowed, soft, but suddenly sharp beneath the sweetness. "Lily, are you joking?" I blinked. "What? No, I'm just—" "Why would you offer only 1,000?" she asked, like she was asking why I'd shown up barefoot. I tried to keep my tone even. "It's a gesture, Mom. I didn't expect to pay, but I want to help." She didn't smile. "This dinner is to celebrate you," she said, eyes locked onto mine. "And you think it's okay to offer 1,000. I felt something cold stir in my stomach. Because I finally understood what she meant. I forced a small laugh. "Okay, then I'll add another 500. Before I could even finish the sentence, my father cut in. His voice wasn't loud. That was what made it worse. It was firm, commanding, like a judge issuing a decision. "Lily," he said, "you're paying for the whole thing." The restaurant noise faded in my ears. It was like all the warmth drained out of the room in one breath. I stared at him. "That's not fair. You and Mom invited me." She said the family was throwing a celebration. Across the table, my cousin Jasper, young, nervous, too honest for his own good, let his confusion slip out. "Wait," he said, glancing at his mom like he was checking if he'd misunderstood. "Lily was invited?" Aunt Brenda told my mom that Lily was treating everyone to dinner to celebrate her promotion. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence where you can hear someone swallow. I saw Aunt Stella, Jasper's mother, whip her head toward him and shoot him a glare so sharp it could have drawn blood. The message was clear. "Shut up, you weren't supposed to say that." And in that instant, the whole night rearranged itself in my mind like puzzle pieces clicking into place. The extravagant food, the endless wine, my mother's fake sweetness, her constant scanning. She wasn't checking if I was happy. She was checking if the audience was complete. This wasn't a dinner for me. It was a dinner because of me. A dinner they wanted, staged under my name, so they could indulge without consequences. And now the consequence had arrived. Me. Brielle leaned back in her chair, lips curling with disgust like she'd been waiting for her turn. "You're so selfish," she said loudly. "How can you expect Mom and Dad to pay for this? They threw this party for you. You should be more considerate." My chest tightened. There it was, the golden child speaking with borrowed authority. Then the relatives joined in, one after another, like a chorus that had rehearsed this behind my back. Uncle Austin shrugged. "Brielle's right. Everyone came out for you." Aunt Brenda added, smiling like she was being kind. "Lily, you make good money. This is nothing to you." My hands clenched in my lap under the table. I looked around at faces that were no longer celebrating me. They were measuring me, weighing how much they could take. I swallowed, voice low but steady. "I'm not paying for everyone. I'll cover my part. We can split the bill." That's when my father stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. He pointed at me like I was a stranger who'd insulted him in his own home. "You got promoted," he shouted. "You pay the bill." A few heads turned from nearby tables. The server froze, eyes flicking between us. My father's voice grew louder, fueled by the attention. "If you don't pay for tonight's dinner," he barked, "don't come back home. You're embarrassing me in front of the whole family over one meal." Something in my chest snapped taut. Over one meal. He was willing to exile me, his daughter, over money. But the worst part wasn't his threat. It was that the family didn't look shocked. They looked expectant, like this was the natural outcome. Like I would fold. Like I always did. I wanted to argue. I wanted to stand up and tell them exactly what they were. But then I saw the server again, standing there for nearly 10 minutes now, stuck in our chaos, forced to smile through humiliation that wasn't hers. And something in me went still. I refused to let my family drag an innocent stranger into their mess any longer. I called the server over. My hand didn't shake when I pulled out my card. It didn't shake because I wasn't weak. It shook because rage had nowhere else to go. "I'll pay," I said. The moment the words left my mouth, my mother's shoulders relaxed like she'd just won something. The server hurried away. When she returned, I signed the receipt and left a $100 tip. Not because I wanted to be generous, but because I wanted one human being in that room to feel respected. And of course, Brielle couldn't let even that pass. She leaned toward me with a smirk so smug it made my skin crawl. "You're willing to give $100 to a server," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "But you're stingy with your own family. That's hilarious." I slowly turned my head toward her. And for the first time that night, I didn't soften my voice. I didn't smile. I didn't cushion the truth. "Shut your mouth," I said, low and sharp. Her smirk faltered. I leaned closer, eyes locked onto hers. "She has 1,000 times more character than anyone at this table." Brielle went silent. The air went cold. The server handed my card back. My mother glanced at it, actually glanced at it like it was a piece of jewelry. "Nice card," she murmured. "You should open a secondary one for me sometime." I didn't answer. I stood up. I didn't look at my father. I didn't look at my mother. I didn't give the relatives the satisfaction of seeing tears or fury or anything they could twist into their own story. But before I left, I paused. And I spoke clearly, quiet but loud enough for every person at that table to hear. "From now on," I said, "don't expect me to show up at any family gatherings again." No one replied. No one stopped me. Because deep down, they believed I was bluffing. They believed I'd cool down. That I'd come back, like always. I walked out of Ocean and Barrel and headed straight to my car. And that night I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel relief. I felt something worse. I felt awake. Because I finally understood something I'd spent my whole life refusing to name. This wasn't about a bill. It was about a pattern. A lifetime of rules in my parents' house written to protect one person. And that person was never me. That night, sleep never came. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the dinner over and over. Not the shouting, not the number on the bill, but the looks. The ease with which everyone had decided my role for me. The certainty in my father's voice when he said I'd pay, as if my autonomy had been revoked years ago without my knowledge. The money wasn't the problem. I could afford the $4,313.45. What I couldn't afford was the realization that no matter how successful I became, no matter how carefully I lived, I would always be their emergency fund. Their solution. Their fallback. Sometime around 4 in the morning, I stopped asking myself why they were like this, and started asking myself a different question. How long have I been helping them believe this was okay? The days that followed were quiet. No calls. No messages. No, "Did you get home safe?" or "We should talk." It was as if that dinner had never happened. As if I hadn't paid a bill that cost more than my first car. As if I hadn't drawn a line so clear it felt like a crack splitting my life in two. I told myself not to be surprised. Silence had always been their favorite weapon. The phone finally rang the following Saturday morning, just after 10. "Mom." I stared at the screen longer than I needed to. Part of me already knew what she wanted. I answered anyway. Her voice came through calm and businesslike, skipping pleasantries entirely. "Brielle needs $50,000, she said. She wants to invest with a friend. Can you help her?" There it was. No apology. No acknowledgement of the dinner. Just another withdrawal request. I took a slow breath. Why isn't Brielle calling me herself? A pause. Then irritation. "What does it matter who asks?" she snapped. "Can you help or not?" I leaned back against my kitchen counter, staring at the window as sunlight spilled in like it had nothing to do with me. "Why?" I asked quietly. "Do you always ask me?" She scoffed. "Because you're capable. Because you're stable. Because family helps family." The words felt rehearsed. I replied just as evenly. "I don't have the money." She laughed. Actually laughed. Sharp and disbelieving. "What do you mean you don't have the money? You just got promoted. Your salary went up. You have savings. Why are you being so selfish?" Selfish. The word slid into place like it had been waiting there my whole life. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply said, "I can't help," and ended the call. For the first time, my chest didn't ache afterward. I felt detached. That evening, a little after 8, my doorbell rang. I already knew who it was. The camera showed my mother standing stiffly in the hallway, Brielle beside her with arms crossed, her expression carefully practiced, half wounded, half offended. I considered not opening the door. But I didn't want a scene, so I opened it. They stepped inside without waiting to be invited. My mother sat down immediately, placing her handbag on the chair like she was claiming territory. She took a breath and said slowly, like she'd memorized it, "Brielle and we're sorry about the other night." I didn't respond. I just looked at them. So I continued for her. "If you're sorry," I said, "pay me back for the dinner." Brielle's eyes widened. "You know we don't have that kind of money." I laughed then. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. And sure enough, after exactly 2 minutes of stiff small talk, the real reason for their visit surfaced. They wanted the $50,000. Again. This time with a sob story. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I listened quietly, nodding occasionally, letting them talk themselves into comfort. Then I spoke. "I'll lend the money," I said calmly, "as a loan, with a written agreement, market rate interest, and Mom and Dad will be the guarantors. The reaction was immediate. My mother's face flushed red. "You're charging family interest?" she snapped. Brielle jumped in, her voice sharp now. "You're unbelievable. You make all this money and you can't even help your own sister." I held their gaze, steady and unflinching. "Don't get it twisted," I said slowly. "No real family traps someone into a dinner and forces them to pay for it." Silence. "And no real family plays favorites with one child," I continued, "then turns around and demands the other carry all the responsibility." They didn't argue back. Not because they agreed, but because they'd run out of leverage. I stood and walked to the door. "This conversation is over," I said. "If you don't leave right now, I'll call the police." For a moment, I thought my mother might explode. Instead, she stood stiffly, grabbed her bag, and walked out without another word. Brielle followed, not looking at me. I locked the door the second it closed. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. "Jasper," I answered immediately. His voice was low, tense. "Lily, I think you should be careful." I listened. He told me about a call he overheard, my mother speaking with Aunt Brenda, discussing Brielle's investment, laughing about how I'd probably cave. "She asked if you suspected anything," Jasper said, and Aunt Brenda said, "She still thinks we're sorry." Something inside me went cold. After we hung up, I didn't hesitate. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice almost cheerful. "I knew you'd call," she said. "You're going to help Brielle, right?" "I know everything," I replied. Silence. "You're in debt," I continued, "and you used Brielle as cover to squeeze money out of me." She tried to protest. I ended the call. Then I left every family group chat. Blocked her number. My father's. Brielle's. I didn't feel angry. I felt finished. The next morning at work, while I was reviewing shipment timelines, a coworker leaned over and set a cup of coffee beside me. "Hey," he said lightly, "looks like your family drama just went public." I frowned. "What?" He showed me his phone. A post. A viral one. The title made my stomach drop. "My sister Lily Parker cut off our entire family because we asked her to help our mom." The author? Brielle. And as I scrolled, reading lie after lie dressed up as heartbreak, I realized something chilling. When they lost access to me privately, they decided to punish me publicly. And this time, they weren't just coming for my money. They were coming for my name. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Not because I didn't understand what I was reading, but because part of me still couldn't believe Brielle had actually done it. She hadn't just complained to friends. She hadn't vented in private. She had written a 2,000-word post in a massive family drama community, one with over 1 million members, and painted herself as the victim of a cold, successful sister who had abandoned her roots. My name was there. My city. My job. My salary, rounded, exaggerated, but close enough to be dangerous. The post opened with grief, loss, a struggling younger sister trying to help her mother. Then it twisted. According to Brielle, I had humiliated our parents at dinner, refused to pay out of spite, screamed at our mother in my apartment, and accused her of scamming me. The comments were already piling up. Some defended her immediately. "She sounds heartless. Money changes people. Your mom deserves better." Others stayed neutral. A few, just a few, asked questions. Why was the dinner so expensive? Why wasn't there proof? Why did the apology sound rehearsed? Brielle replied only to the comments that supported her. To the rest, she stayed silent. She knew exactly what she was doing. I felt nothing. Not rage. Not panic. Just a hollow stillness. Because this was the moment it finally clicked. They didn't hate me. They hated that they couldn't control me anymore. And silence, my silence, was something they had always relied on. I stood up from my desk, walked into an empty conference room, and closed the door behind me. Then I called Connor Hale. Connor had been my best friend since college. The kind of friend who knew when to joke and when to go quiet. He was a lawyer now, civil litigation, reputation law. He picked up after 3 rings. "Lily," he said immediately, "you don't call at work hours unless something's wrong." "There's a post," I said. "My sister wrote it. It's spreading fast." His tone shifted instantly. "Send me the link." I did. 7 minutes later, he called back. "Oh, this is defamatory," he said flatly. "She used identifying details. She implied criminal behavior. This can damage your professional reputation." I closed my eyes. "What do we do?" "First," he said, "screenshots. Everything. Post, edits, comments, timestamps. Then I send a formal cease and desist and takedown demand. If she doesn't comply, we escalate." "I don't care about an apology," I said. There was a pause. "Then this isn't about closure," Connor said. "No," I replied. "It's about boundaries." "Understood," he said. "Let me handle it." That night, I didn't go straight home. I stopped at a small bar near my apartment and sat alone with a glass of scotch, letting the quiet settle in. That was when I admitted something I'd never said out loud before. I hadn't survived my family because I was strong. I survived because I stayed quiet. And they mistook that for permission. When I got home, I checked the post again. The comments had doubled. People were speculating about my identity now, guessing companies, locations, even LinkedIn profiles. And then I saw something that made my stomach tighten. A username I recognized. Vanessa R. She had commented twice. Once defending Brielle, once adding context. Details that hadn't been in the original post. Details only someone close to me would know. Vanessa was my boyfriend, Ethan's ex-girlfriend. They hadn't spoken in over a year. At least, that's what I'd been told. When Ethan got home later that night, I showed him the post. I watched his face carefully. His jaw tightened when he saw Vanessa's name. She has no right to be involved, he said immediately. How does she know so much? I asked. He hesitated, then sighed. She used to do freelance PR, he admitted. Online reputation stuff, crisis narratives. The words settled between us like ice. My family hadn't just reacted. They had planned. I didn't sleep much that night. But for the first time, I didn't feel powerless. 3 days later, just before noon, Connor texted me. She edited the post. Check now. I opened the app. Right above the original title was a new paragraph. Italicized, cautious, carefully worded. Edit. After speaking with my family and receiving additional information, I acknowledge that some details in my original post were not entirely accurate. I apologize if the post caused misunderstanding. Please refrain from speculation. She hadn't deleted it. She hadn't clarified what was false. She hadn't taken responsibility. She'd just added a patch to a lie that was already bleeding. And the community noticed. The tone of the comments shifted almost immediately. If it wasn't accurate, why leave it up? Sounds like someone got a lawyer. Funny how the story changes when consequences show up. People who had attacked me before started backtracking. Others turned on Brielle. I read every single comment, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. This wasn't victory. This was exposure. That afternoon, I texted Connor. She posted a correction. He replied instantly, "Told you, people like that only understand pressure." I smiled faintly. That night, Ethan sat beside me on the couch, his hand resting lightly on mine. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for my part in this." "You didn't create it," I replied, "but thank you for standing here." And as I leaned back, watching the city lights through my window, I realized something important. They had tried to shame me into silence. Instead, they taught me something far more valuable. I didn't need to explain myself to people who benefited from misunderstanding me. All I had to do was stop protecting them and let the truth stand. The edit didn't erase what had already been done. It only confirmed it. Within hours, the comment section flipped like a tide. People who had once called me cold-hearted began asking uncomfortable questions, questions Brielle couldn't answer without unraveling her own story. If it wasn't accurate, why not delete it? Why admit mistakes but keep the accusations? Who posts something like this with real names if it's just venting? Brielle stopped replying altogether. That silence, her silence, was louder than anything she'd written. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post a rebuttal. I didn't jump into the comments to defend myself, even though I finally had the upper hand. Because winning wasn't the point. The point was that for the first time, I wasn't scrambling to be understood by people who had already decided who I was. That afternoon, an unknown number texted me. "You're really going to drag the whole family into court over something this petty?" I stared at the screen for a long moment. Not because I was hurt, but because it confirmed what I already knew. To them, my reputation was petty. My dignity was optional. My silence was expected. I deleted the message without replying. That night, Ethan and I sat on the balcony, the city humming beneath us. He told me something he'd been holding back, something small but telling. Vanessa hadn't just commented randomly. She'd messaged Brielle first, offered help shaping the narrative, a cleaner victim arc, a clearer villain. Me. I wasn't surprised. I felt done. The next morning at work, nothing had changed. Shipments still needed rerouting. Meetings still ran long. Deadlines still pressed in. And yet everything had changed, because my phone stayed quiet. No calls from my mother. No messages from my father. No dramatic pleas from Brielle. They were waiting for me to crack. Waiting for me to reach out and say, "Okay, let's talk." I never did. 3 days later, exactly 3, Connor called. "They won't push further," he said. "The risk's too high now, but if they do, we're ready." "Good," I replied. After we hung up, I sat there for a while, thinking about the night at Ocean and Barrel, about the number on the bill. $4,313.45. It was funny in a way. They thought that was the price of celebrating me. But it turned out to be something else entirely. It was the receipt. The receipt for years of being overlooked, for being compared, for being valued only when I was useful. And like any receipt, it marked the end of a transaction. That evening, I met Connor at the same bar near my apartment. We didn't talk about lawsuits or strategy. We talked about college memories, bad dates, future trips, about how sometimes the people who stand beside you are more family than the ones you share blood with. Before we left, Connor raised his glass and said, half smiling, "You know, a lot of people would have folded." I shrugged. I folded for years. I just didn't anymore. When I got home, I stood in my living room, lights off, city glowing through the windows. And for the first time in a long time, my mind was quiet. Not because I was numb, but because I had no more expectations left to be disappointed by. So now I'll ask you, the ones who stayed with me until the end. Do you think I was wrong for walking away from my family over $4,313.45? Or was that bill simply the moment I finally saw the cost of staying? Thank you for listening. And if this story meant something to you, you know what to do. This chapter is closed.